Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski of the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing today?
Doing great, Eric. How are you?
Doing fantastic.
Happy Ides of March.
Yes, and at least in the Northeast, the Ides of March are really cold this year, which is interesting because we had a fairly warm week followed by snow squalls. So, you never know what's going to happen.
Typical New England. I'm looking out. The sky is blue as can be, but it is, it's more like a January day today here. It's only in the 20s. So.
Yeah. So this week, we're going to talk about putting together processes, why you need them, and how they should be put together. And, being as we're halfway through March, most people have already gotten rid of their New Year's resolutions. They've given up on them. And the reason that most people give up on them is that they didn't put a process in place to achieve those goals. So without having the proper process, they just decided, all right, I'm not even going to do it. It's too much work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously coming up with an idea is one thing and putting it into action is another thing. And so it's really, really important to go through this. I mean, I did a little bit of research and so on and so forth, and there's all kinds of different, methodologies out there as far as that goes. But I saw there was a 7-step process that looked pretty simple. And basically, what we first talked about, the New Year's resolution, was a goal, defining a goal. But then in order to make that work, you have to plan and map out your process. And, this one was more geared towards businesses. So if a business wants to start a process, then they got to set actions and assign people to own that, test it, implement it, monitor it, and then just repeat it. And this does remind me a lot of your book, The Business Way, when you're talking about business operations. But as you mentioned, and we'll get into this more, it's really important on a personal standpoint too. If you can set up processes to get things going and have things written down and organized, you got a lot better chance of succeeding at doing what you're doing, and you'll also feel a whole lot more relaxed.
Yes, and something that you had just touched upon is that you said this was a simple way to do it, and that's key. People get all nervous when you talk about processes and operations. So the way I want people to think about it is that there's a certain element that you already have processes and operations set up for. And it's usually around a holiday, because you will have holiday traditions, whether it's Easter, Christmas, Passover, Kwanzaa, whatever holiday it is. Most of us have these holiday traditions, and the traditions make us feel good because we remember doing them, and it's over and over again, year after year. Well, the reason these traditions work is because it's a process. You generally have the same type of food every year. You follow the same recipe every year. In many cases, these recipes are passed down generation to generation. You get together at the same person's house every year. The same people. This is actually a process that you've put together unconsciously to create that holiday feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm looking forward to Easter 2 weeks from Sunday. Last year, we didn't have it because of the COVID thing, but with the vaccinations getting done and so on and so forth, we're going to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But you're absolutely right. And basically, our normal Easter meal is this and that and whatever. And my mom was responsible for making the Wumpkies, and Nancy makes the lasagna, and I grill the tenderloin roast, blah, 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 blah. And basically, if we want to tweak it, we all know that that's it. And then it's just inviting people, and everybody on both sides of the family always has it in their calendar because our house is it. And even though it's going to be smaller this year, you're right. I mean, and it's the same thing for all the other holidays that you're talking about, Thanksgiving and whatever other stuff is going on. It's and it's so much fun doing it. It organizes everything, and you're right. It's just embedded in your mind. Don't even have to write it down.
That's it. So, we've already created processes for these holidays. It's not that big of a jump to be able to create them for other parts of your life or your business or career. The first trick, though, is not to be afraid of doing it. As you said in that 7-step process, the first step is setting the goal. What is that goal? And once you do that, you need to break down what you need to do to accomplish that goal. And I was talking with a number of people. People were complaining about new laws that are being debated in the Connecticut state legislature and why these things haven't worked in the past. And it really did come down to process, because what most politicians tend to do is they come up with their goal, but they never really put together a process as to how they're going to accomplish it. And the biggest mistake most governments make, and in fact a lot of businesses make as well, is forgetting that the first part of the process is to make sure you have the resources that you can complete the rest of the process.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Go ahead.
It really is important that you put the steps in the right order. So it's not just figuring out what steps, you've got to have them in the right order.
Yeah, and another simple list that I have here, I just talked about the business process life cycle, but another one I looked at, which is even simpler, the right way to create a process. Number one, just do the task yourself. And number two, write down how you did that, not leaving any of those steps out. And then number three, structuring the steps into a high-level overview. In other words, organizing them. Number four, breaking the high-level steps down into smaller items. In other words, chunking things down. And then number five, detailing those things using, images, videos, whatever you want to do to explain everything. But again, it starts, with doing it yourself. And if you're doing it once, why not write down how you're doing it? And that gives you really the structure for you to analyze things. And, the last part, the other one that I was talking about is implementing the process. And basically what you have to do is just tweak it based upon what the results are.
Exactly. And that's also, there's two very important points to what you just said. The first one was chunking it down. When you're putting together a process, you have to assume that the person that's going to follow the process does not know anything about it. So if you're talking about creating a slideshow, you don't start with, create slideshow. You start with turn on computer. Then you go launch PowerPoint, or however simple you have to make it.
Yeah.
And that's so important.
Yeah.
Because the simpler you make it, the easier it is for somebody else to follow it.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that you talk about in the book, if you're doing it yourself, basically write down a checklist of how you did it. That's the easiest way to really just document what you have. And, if you're looking at businesses and hiring people or subbing things out and so on and so forth, if you just have a checklist that shows how you do things, you automatically have a training piece for whoever you're subbing that out to. And you also have an accountability piece for yourself or for whoever is doing that. So really a process is as easy as just writing down a checklist as to how you're doing things. And starting with that, checklists are wonderful.
Absolutely. Checklists have power. They're great things to use very simply. It doesn't have to be this huge process chart with forks, and it can be a simple checklist. But something else you said at the end of that process is to, check to make sure you got the result you wanted. One of the things that keeps people from creating processes is the fear that they're not doing it right. Don't worry about whether or not you're doing it right, because you can always go back and redo it. If the process doesn't give you the result you want, you can go back and tweak it so that it does give you the result you want. And in fact, you should be doing that on a regular basis anyway, as part of continuous improvement, so that your process is always evolving and always getting better.
Yeah, and the big thing there is just don't hesitate to do that. Don't, as you're saying, try and get everything right before you even start doing it in the first place, because then you're procrastinating and you're just putting off what's going on. I mean, one of my favorite phrases, I forget which book I read it in, but instead of ready, aim, shoot, you're usually getting stuck in the aiming. It's ready, shoot, and aim. And the aiming is really taking a look at how things are going and readjusting things, but you got to keep shooting to get the results that you need, or realize the results that you got to change.
Right. There's another old saying that perfect is the enemy of good. And what that means is people spend so much time trying to get something perfect that they never actually complete it. So you want to aim for good and then just keep improving rather than trying to make it perfect. And the fact of the matter is, nothing is ever perfect. Perfect is something you aim at, but it's not something that's achievable. You have to keep improving. So, don't procrastinate wondering, is it good enough? Aim for good, get it done. And then if it's not good enough, go back, make adjustments, and try again.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what you have for your goals and so on and so forth, which is basically a result that you want to achieve in the so-called future, the only thing that we ever have is the present moment, which means we have to keep busy doing things in the present moment towards achieving that, and one step closer at a time. And the bottom line is, not everything is going to be perfect, which is kind of like a futuristic word. You're going to have your ups and downs, but trial and error is how you get to where you're looking to get.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that you don't have to be perfect. When I was running a few publications for a division of Reuters, we had an editorial process that was geared towards getting rid of any typos, any mistakes, anything like that, striving to get it perfect. But we also had deadlines that we had to meet. So we actually had a file of articles from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, very high-end magazines that we had found errors in. And this was there to remind us that everybody makes mistakes. We don't have to be the ones that never make a mistake. If we make a mistake, it's okay as long as we go back and fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, life would be pretty boring if we always got everything right. We all need challenges, and challenges make things happen. So it's more fun that way. It's more frustrating and so on and so forth. But who wants to flatline perfection? I certainly don't.
All right, there's a quote, I think it's from Woody Allen, actually, who said, if you're never making a mistake, you're never expanding your mind, or something. If you never make a mistake, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Because if you're staying in your comfort zone where you never make a mistake, you're not expanding, you're not trying new things, and you really do need to. So when you're creating that process, perfection is not necessary. It's, what we all strive for. But when you put it together step by step, you follow the steps, you get to your goal. If the goal isn't quite what you imagined, try again. And again, these processes can be as simple as a list. I think some of the best processes are actually recipes that we follow in the kitchen, because it tells you what the resources are you'll need in terms of ingredients. It tells you the process. Mix these, add these. It gives you the order that they all have to be done in. And then usually the best ones have a picture for you to aspire to hit That's what your goal looks like.
Yep, the perfect pie. It's so working on this, we talked about on the business side of things, but in your personal life, I mean, if you want to have a fulfilled life, and I talk all the time about living with the 4 P's: purpose, passion, positivity, and a plan. The plan is so important, and you need that for every aspect of your life. A lot of people make the mistake of prioritizing just their jobs and doing a good job. And the bottom line is, yes, you're going to get some satisfaction out of doing that, but your job and what you're doing monetarily as a result of that is just going to facilitate everything else that you're doing in your life. And if you don't have plans for that, you're not going to be a very happy person. So putting together a personal strategic plan, which is a process of developing goals for every aspect of your life. And this is health, it could be recreation, family, relationships, and so on and so forth. Start writing things down that you want to accomplish with that, and then start writing step-by-step things that you're going to be doing to accomplish that. For instance, it's always nice to be looking forward to having a vacation or a getaway. Plan it today and make a reservation now so that you have something to look forward to, in a couple months. If there's other things that you want to do in your life, again, just write down that checklist, put things down on paper, and then organize them. I recommend using a spreadsheet, which I've talked about before. That way you can just write down a whole bunch of ideas, and then you can put it in another column, the categorizing things, such as personal, physical, relationships, and so on and so forth, and then sort things out, and all of a sudden you have an organized way to work on things.
Exactly. You want to be using processes in all parts of your life. I mean, you mentioned a vacation. For a vacation, in fact, you should be working backwards and not go, oh, I've got a vacation coming up. Where do I want to go? Switch it around. Where do you want to go? Then you figure out what that's going to cost and put a process in place to make sure you're saving the money for it. And in fact, the perfect example of where you need a process around the house is if anybody's ever tried to clean out their garage or their attic. I mean, talk about something that feels overwhelming when you walk in to do it. Put together that plan. You're going to attack this area first. You're going to sort what's there, and figure out how you're going to do it step by step. This way, you're not walking into this huge room of clutter going, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about basically organizational strategy, or professional organization too, which is really, really important when it comes to your business. And, for instance, when you get the mail, you should sort your mail out into stuff that you're going to throw out, stuff that you may have to look at a little bit later, and put that in the proper place to do that, and stuff that you can take care of right now. And if you are going to go out and organize your garage or some other place, obviously what you need to do is figure out, okay, what are your strategies for throwing things out, things that you may want to give away, and so on and so forth. Come up with that in the first place. And then once you're done with it, come up with a process to make sure that you don't start piling things up again.
Exactly. In fact, several months back, I actually went through the process of clearing out our garage. And just looking around, I realized the first step was get a dumpster. Because I didn't have that's not something you have around the house, and there was so much stuff to throw out. Start there. When you start with that process, get a dumpster. Start in this part of the garage. Move on to this part. And also figure out, okay, got a giant platform that's great for putting things, but first I've got to get rid of all the stuff that's between me and the platform. Putting together that process really helps get it done simpler, because you're not trying to figure it out at every given point. You've got the process, follow the process, move on. In business, the process is important because if you're a business owner, you don't want to have to do everything. And in fact, if your entire business is just you and nobody else can do it, there's no value to the business when you want to sell the business. So you want to be able to have these processes so that you can hire an employee, hand them the process, and go, this is what you do. And they can follow the process, and your clients get the same level of professionalism and the same results they did when you get it, because they're doing the exact same thing that you did by following that process.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to kind of like research these things out there too, but really the simplest thing that a business does need to do is just put together a strategic plan. And also you need to do this in life. And a strategic plan really is, here is where I am right now, here's where I'm going, and here's how I'm going to get there. So in business, it's basically, all right, I have my business right now. This is what I do, but this is what I want to achieve for sales moving ahead in the future, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and so on. And then I have to put together my business development strategies to get the sales in the door. And you have to put together your operational strategies to get the things done once you get the sales in. You and I both talk about networking a whole lot. And this process has to be done when you're preparing for a networking meeting. That's all part about how I'm going to get this work in the first place. And basically, it could be a combination of networking and using the internet and social media and so on and so forth to get the sales out. But you have to really identify these strategies on paper and then put the process together to get it done. And it will guide you. If you have this down well enough, you want to identify who your strategic prospects are, who you need to develop strategic relationships with to get more of these prospects in the door, that kind of thing. And when you go to a networking meeting, prepared to ask for people you want to develop relationships with or particular customers specifically, you're going to be a whole lot more successful. I mean, you hear a lot of people going to networking meetings or even joining chambers of commerce and how can I increase this and how can I increase that? And my first question is, what's your plan? Who do you want to meet? And so on and so forth. And the more specific you are with that, the better off it's going to be. And it is a process just to develop that. But it's not that hard. You just got to take the time to do it.
That's it. It takes time. But again, it's not a difficult thing to do. And, you were talking about your strategic plan and doing that. And it sounds very daunting because the language we use sounds daunting. But when you really think about it, think of it as a trip. You know where your starting point is. You know where you want to end up. The process is the map. It's your GPS. It's telling you where to go. So really think of that process as your GPS saying, in 20 feet, make a right turn. It's literally that simple. It's just following those directions. The difference is you have to figure out what those directions are. You don't have an automated GPS telling you, but it really isn't that simple, that difficult. You go through it, make a note of what steps you're taking. Think about it as going somewhere for the first time. You may use your GPS to get there and follow those instructions. But after you've been there 3 or 4 times, you don't need the GPS anymore. You've got the process internalized. That's the same thing you do with your business in your life. You go through the process, you figure out what it is, follow it step by step a couple of times, and you internalize it the same way you do when you're going somewhere.
Yeah. And I used to love, when I was much younger, BC, before computers and all that kind of stuff, the old AAA triptychs.
Yes.
And basically what they do is they would take out this whole map of, we used to drive to Wisconsin every single summer, all 9 of us in a Grand Safari wagon. It looked like Chevy Chase out of Vacation or whatever. But what we would do is we'd pick out a hotel somewhere in Ohio or whatever to stop on the way out there. And it would have all the different things listed out there. And basically they had their little travel guides for you to look at. But that was just a process of planning things. I mean, now you can go online and look at computers and so on and so forth. And, for vacations, for those of you out there saying, I have no idea where I want to go go on the YouTube channel, not the YouTube TV, just the YouTube channel on your TV if you want, and just type in vacation areas and so on and so forth, and you're going to find bests of here's and bests of theirs to give you all kinds of ideas. I mean, YouTube is like a video encyclopedia for things to look up if you want to figure out, things that you want to do. But again, it's just so important to just figure out where you are right now, where you're going, and what the process is how you're getting there.
That's it. Again, a lot of people spend a lot of time figuring out where they want to go, where they want to end up, what their ultimate goal is. But it's just as important to spend the time figuring out how you're going to get there. And in most cases, you should also figure out why. Why is that your goal? Because that why will influence the how. Because maybe the why of your goal isn't what you think it is, and there are better ways to get to that why. It's all about setting those goals, figuring out your why, but the process is the how. It's, step by step, make it simple. And you'll find when you write down the process, once you've got it down, it's a big stress reliever because you're not trying to keep everything in your head. You're not worried and trying to reinvent the wheel every step. You've already figured out step by step how to do it. It makes it easier. It's relaxing, which is, part of the mindset part of all of this is that you want to relieve that stress. You don't want to be constantly under stress. The process literally lets you put yourself on autopilot. It's just go along step by step. That's why it can be a checklist. If it's a very complicated process where multiple results can happen, yes, you'll want to make a flow chart. If this happens, then do this. If this happens, then do that. But once it's down, you can follow along very easily. And, again, I say flow chart. A lot of people use decision trees in their personal lives. It's all the same thing. It's just a matter of putting together a map to get you where you want to be. All right, so we're coming up on the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think the big takeaway for this week is?
Well, in the last segment that you talked about, it's so important to work on yourself and find that purpose and your passion and your why you're doing things, because it makes everything else make sense. And you got to be getting out of bed every day pumped up to do something. And the hows, that is your process as far as how you're going to get there. And as I said, I think one of the easiest things to do is to just write down a quick checklist of how you're going to get things done as you're doing it. And so if you start out with that, then you have things that you can look at and you can tweak. But the bottom line is just find that purpose and passion, come up with some things that you want to do, whatever your goals are, and then start writing a quick process as far as to how you're going to achieve them. And magic is going to happen in your life. So enjoy.
Absolutely. I think for me, the big takeaway is that the process is about keeping things simple. And in fact, Albert Einstein actually said, you want to make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. So you don't want to be adding extraneous steps. You just want your process to be as simple as possible, step by step, so you can achieve what you want essentially on autopilot. That's what processes are for, and that's why we need them, not just for business, but in things we're doing in our lives as well. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.